this morning, as part of the emphasis that we've had at that covenant as a decision of the, or at least a reference by our ministers, the deacons council, the committee chairs, we have just want to have an emphasis on white supremacy, racial inequality, all of those things for this year, not for every session, but to have this as a regular theme, recognizing that particularly those of us who are white, I think we're coming somewhat to see the inequalities between white and minorities, people of color, BIPOC. And as one person wrote, I'm sure others have thought it, I guess it was after the George Floyd thing, when that was going on so strongly the first time, someone says, this inequity wasn't discovered, it was uncovered. And of course, not uncovered for everyone. But in any case, we have with us this morning, Ann Slater and Amanda Yoder. They are, both of them are therapists. They have developed, I guess you developed it on your own and thought about this, about we need to understand, white people need to understand more about whiteness and the advantages, but also the inequalities that it produces. And so they're here with us this morning. They will tell you about a program they have developed and introduce you to it, and also to see if this is something that members of our church would be interested in. So Ann and Amanda, take that over and you can hit your share screen. And we are looking forward to this.
Bill, thank you so much. And good morning to all of you. It just is feels like such an honor to be sharing this Zoom space with you this Sunday morning after Easter. And Bill, just really thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting us here today. And to Karen for really supporting our work. This was Karen's idea initially for us to be here. She invited Amanda and me in and coordinated with Bill, and just really grateful to you, Karen, for having that idea and for your support. So, and also just want to say, you know, how heartened, I'm going to speak for you, Amanda, when I say so heartened by Covenant's commitment to racial justice and to really examining white supremacy and what that means, so that we can hopefully dismantle and lead more equitable lives together. So Amanda, I'll let you introduce our program.
I echo Ann with gratitude for you, Bill and Karen. Thank you. And I'm afraid my internet might be a little blippy. So Ann, will you tell me if I freeze? Okay, thank you. What we want to do today is spend a little time with you describing what were some of the specific problems we wanted to tackle in creating this thing we call Examining Whiteness, this group that's turned into a bit of a community as well. Mm-hmm. And we want to explain this to you as a way of inviting you into it. Hopefully you'll be interested in participating once you hear more about it. But what we want to do today is go through some of the central issues we wanted to address. And as Ann said, I mean, our mission is really as vast and daunting a mission as we hope to communicate it to be through Examining Whiteness, to dismantle racism, to really as white people use our privilege to attack this thing that has infiltrated all of our lives, and really we come at this through a trauma lens, through the lens of collective trauma, and we'll talk more about that. So really addressing the collective trauma that we all experience in different ways, living in a racist system. So that said, today what we're hoping to do is table the actual conversations about race and racism until we have the container that is built by Examining Whiteness, a process container, a safe container to really delve into what we consider trauma work. And today we just want to talk to you mainly about what Examining Whiteness is. So that's the frame. We, you guys all look like you know netiquette very well, just keeping the, you're all sitting in front of the screen, you all have your mute on. It looks like you're very used to all of this. So thank you for that.
Well, so before we kind of dive into sharing with you about Examining Whiteness, I wanted to just invite all of us into this space and to kind of get centered in our bodies. So if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, please do, or just to however you feel most comfortable in your space. And we're just going to just kind of feel grounded, just feel the seat beneath you, supporting you, and to know that we're all here together to share an experience and a commitment to changing our country. And it's a big commitment and can feel overwhelming. So it's important that we remember to breathe through it. So I just want to invite you to take a couple deep breaths, just to breathe in, nice and slow, and breathe out. Let's do another one of those. Just take a nice, slow, deep breath. And breathe it out. Remember, we're slowing things down today. We always move so quickly. So we're just going to take things nice and slow and appreciate this space that we share together today. So when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes. And we'll get started with diving into Examining Whiteness.
Can everyone see? Well, you can't tell me because you're on mute, but Anne, does it look like?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, thank you so much. It really is so much a part of our work. Anne and I really ascribe to the belief that one of the things about white supremacist culture is this sort of relentless productivity. And so slowing down, getting in our bodies, and really getting in touch with the emotional experience of our lives, of relationship, of healing. It's sort of already a revolutionary thing to just slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you can see this quote. I'll read it to you. This is one of the quotes that really drives us. It's a quote from Malcolm X, and it's in the autobiography of Malcolm X. Let sincere white individuals find all other white people they can, who feel as they do, and let them form their own white groups to work together, trying to convert other white people who are thinking and acting so racist. Let sincere whites go and teach nonviolence to white people. So we are guided by the voices of many Black and Brown people who have been trying to get the attention of white people for generations. And this is one of the quotes that guides us.
Mm-hmm.
This is a list of the problems, more or less. We tried to coalesce the problems that we wanted examining whiteness to address. And so this is a list of the 6 things that we're going to go through in the next slides. You can sort of skim it if you want as you look at it now, but we'll be going through each of these in more detail. And here is the first one.
So yes, so unnecessary continued harm caused to Black and brown people in mixed race spaces as a result of lack of white accountability. So this really kind of explains, because I think some people, when we say that we're examining whiteness and we're a group of white people who come together, kind of have some feelings about that. What about, you know, Black and brown voices? And so part of, you know, as Malcolm X alludes to, that we feel like it's our job to really to be able to process some of the emotions that come up. A lot of times, you know, in my experience in mixed race conversations, that the emotions that come up for white people can hijack the conversation and can ultimately cause more harm to the Black and brown people in the group, because, you know, the way that we're conditioned, you know, is to protect white people. And you know, and I want to be compassionate, because there's also, you know, there's a way that we identify with the experience of white people. That is who we are. And so, you know, the feelings that come up around racism are real. And as Amanda said, we really we look at race and racism through a trauma lens. And, you know, part of how that works is that no matter, I don't think that there is a single person who, when the word racism comes up, doesn't feel that in your body. Somewhere in your body, whether you freeze up or you feel a need to be defensive, or you feel like there's a gut punch or sadness. And that is how trauma operates. It's in our bodies, and racism is no different. So really examining whiteness, we provide this space for white people to come together and really work to process through the difficult emotions that come up for us, whether it's shame, defensiveness, the pain that comes along with really facing this part of our history and our culture. And so that we can also, you know, so we can kind of process through these feelings, so that we can build resilience to the emotions, so that we can show up in conversations with our Black and brown brothers and sisters in a way that we can support them. And, you know, one of the other big, you know, challenges is really to learn when to speak up and when to be silent. You know, I think a lot about Martin Luther King saying silence is betrayal. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. And so how do we know when it's, you know, at the same time and kind of on the opposite end of that, you know, just as I was saying, that a lot of times in mixed race spaces, that white people's emotions and feelings can take front and center. So then in those instances, we're taking up too much space. And so we're really practicing in this space together, knowing when do we speak out and when do we sit back and really listen. And I think finally, this wrestling with being a good person, you know, this is something that, you know, I think a lot of times when we talk about, being racist, or if somebody's, we hear that refrain, I'm not a racist, I'm a good person, I'm not a racist. And so that there has been this equation of being racist with being bad, and not being racist as being good. And so we want to understand how we can both be good, well-meaning, well-intentioned people and still be part of upholding a racist system. And it is our responsibility to really understand how we can hold both of those things.
Oh, sorry. So one of the issues that goes along with what Anne was just describing is that as white people, we really, part of our privilege is that we don't know a lot about these systems of racial oppression that we hold up. They're sort of invisible to us because we benefit from them. And one of the really tragic ways that this plays out is through our education system. I mean, on so many levels that I know many of you know well, because it sounds like in this congregation there's more of an awareness around these things than perhaps in other spaces. But still, we found even in examining whiteness, people come into this group, and when we ask people to share just historical examples of egregious, traumatic incidents in our history of racism, people don't have a lot of information. I think after the murder of George Floyd, more white people started paying attention to history and learned more about history. But, overall, it's not something that we have to learn as white people unless we choose to. So what we really try to do in examining whiteness is as this says, contextualize what it means to be white within a historic framework, that this is an ongoing history that we forget because we don't learn it as white people. And so the hope is that because we are really trying to look closely at history, we're actually breaking through this white innocence or this white fog that we've inherited. And that winds up decentering whiteness, even though we are a group of white people talking about whiteness. And so our hope is through critical inquiry, we're actually bringing to light the experiences of Black and Brown people that help us understand how our white people's normal is in some ways a completely diluted perspective.
Mm-hmm. Right, so this is kind of, how do we do this? And so we really feel like, and again, this is something we've kind of alluded to, but that as white people, that we've not really been able historically to really listen to the diversity of Black and Brown voices and to hold their experience as real and true. It's painful. I mean, I really believe that's a big part of it. It's in some ways, I'll speak from my own experience, it can feel really hard to believe. Just because it's so, how is it that this has been going on for hundreds of years and still happens? And it must be, there must be something else that's happening here. So, you know, I think it's easy to kind of like to find excuses or a way to, you know, to believe that the system is operating in a way that is benefiting all people. And because it's really hard to face that, you know, as white people, that we have really been privileged. And so, throughout examining whiteness, you know, a big part of the group is to really dig into education, you know, educating ourselves in between sessions. And we do that by really listening to Black and Brown voices, by reading, you know, scholars and writers and, you know, people who have lived experience, so that we can really deeply listen and learn how to deeply listen. And so that's a big part of the work that we do, is to be able to slow that down and to listen.
I keep getting, oh,
PowerPoint.
yeah, PowerPoint excitement. So one of the things that especially has been brought to light in the past year, many of you have maybe heard of Robin DiAngelo. She wrote a book called White Fragility, and she's been a white educator in often mixed race spaces, but also primarily with white people for many years. And you know, one of the things that really has become more and more controversial is white people financially benefiting from anti-racism work. I mean, to me, it's a pretty clear, to me, it's not that controversial. To me, it feels like when we talk about equity, which is, you know, really righting the wrongs of the past, of creating systems that rebalance the playing field, then for white people to make money doing anti-racism work does not feel like an equitable thing to me and to Anne.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously we do have to make money in our lives. So what we decided to do was to collect a fee for examining whiteness. And the fee is in part to create a commitment on the part of each participant that they've put a financial bid into the work, and that's sort of like they have some skin in the game kind of thing. But what we ask the participants to do toward the end of the sessions is to really think about how, when we talk about reparations and we talk about wealth redistribution, because the history of wealth inequities is profound in this country, and it's one of the things we talk about in examining whiteness. When we think about how would we rectify this, we ask the participants to use the fee that we've collected to really to put that into practice. So what part of the fee would Anne and I receive for administrative costs, and what part of it would be redistributed into Black and Brown communities? And it's a fascinating question for people to answer, because white people are really faced with, what would I do? How much of my income or my taxes, or what is the worth of my work as compared to you know, the inequities of income for Black and Brown people. So that session and that thinking has really been an important part of examining whiteness. Once we figured out we wanted to do that, we needed to figure out how to distribute the money in a way that also felt in the spirit of innovative systems and not the ones that we know before, which is largely white people being charitable, making donations just to sort of not feel guilty, or, you know, to hope that if I put my money out in the world, it'll somehow sort of all work out, when what we know is that every single system is touched by, profoundly rocked, touched, and really built around racism. So how do we think outside that box? And it's a constant question that Anne and I are trying to answer as we create this work. So what we decided to do was we have partnered with a Black-led organization in Houston that is also a burgeoning organization like ours. And for each group, we give them a significant portion of the fee that is to be redistributed. And we trust them to allocate it as they will. But we also meet with them, we collaborate with them, we think about ways that we can not only contribute the fee that we've collected, but also the time from the people in our group who have skills that they can offer if needed to the communities that the organization we partner with serves. The organization we partner with is called Heal For, and well, we encourage you to look them up and support them yourself. They're just the two men who lead it are just full-hearted, humble people who have really given so much of their time to their communities, and we're honored to be partnering with them. The other thing we do is and we'll talk about this in a minute, but another portion of the money is set aside for the participants who've gone through Examining Whiteness continue in the community that of people who've gone through these 6 sessions. And we periodically meet together to brainstorm actions that we can take, and that money is available for us to also put into creative ideas about how to redistribute it.
So competition and individuality in white culture impede solidarity. This idea of kind of a zero-sum game. And from how we view it, I mean, this is such a fundamental premise of white supremacy. I mean, even the word supremacy, you know, is about being the best, being supreme, being better than. And, you know, what this does really is, you know, it keeps us divided. You know, it keeps us apart from one another. And so, you know, a big part of our work through Examining Whiteness is to really be able to understand this. I mean, you know, what does this mean? What does this do to how we relate to each other, especially as white people? You know, because I think when we're talking, so the importance of embodiment and trauma recovery, I mean, so if we are constantly in this kind of zero-sum game, right, and we're forever striving to be better than, the energy that takes, and I will even venture to say the kind of soul-crushing energy that takes to always be striving to be better is really detrimental to our bodies, to our mental health. And so a big part of our work is to be able, as we kind of said in the beginning, to slow down, right? To really regain some connection with our bodies and ultimately with each other. And so, you know, and I think, you know, again, kind of part of this, when you think about you're in competition with someone, you're constantly looking out. You're comparing yourself to those around you. In our kind of racist system, a lot of who we're striving to be, continuing to prove ourselves to be better than, are BIPOC people. And so always looking at them, how can I make sure to kind of stay on top? And through this process, we really forget to kind of come back to ourselves, to really understand what is my, where am I in this? How much am I, kind of operating from a conditioned kind of need to be better than, and how much of this is actually part of my value? And so really inviting kind of that inquiry, to come back to ourselves and come back to each other as white people. And so Amanda was talking about a part 2, and this is where for folks who have gone through the initial kind of 6-week group, that they're kind of officially in the examining whiteness community. And our hope is that we are really building solidarity with one another. None of us, we're working towards this work, but none of us really know. We've never lived in a culture that is racially equitable and racially just. So, we're all kind of fumbling through this together. And that is something that is so valuable, is to be able to kind of come back to that community, to the collaboration, to the idea that nobody is better than anyone else, that we can, both, win and lose, that we're in it together. And so that's a big part of what we hope to accomplish with Examining Whiteness.
There's one of the things that Anne and I really talk about a lot with each other, with the Examining Whiteness community, and in this process, is how many dialectics. There's something very black and white about white supremacist culture as well, and that's what Anne's talking about, this zero-sum game. It's you win, I lose. It's either or in so many ways. It's either, I think I need to think so much about myself as a white person, or I need to, think so much about you as a black person, and worry about you. And, worrying about a black person can also wind up being paternalistic and lead to that kind of charitable, let me help you dynamic. But worrying too much about myself as a white person can sort of then turn inward in this sort of narcissistic way. So we're constantly navigating these this sort of conditioned either or way of thinking. And what we really want to do is create a space where we're challenging that, where every time we get too far on one side, we're bringing ourselves back to creating a new space, something outside of the dialectic, something that is beyond the synthesis of the dialectic, but a new way of thinking. And this, as Anne said, we have to think in a new way, because any precedent we have for thinking hasn't worked before. And when we talk about, we've alluded to trauma in our bodies, and just to say a little bit more about that, one of the things, Resmaa Menakem is a Black social worker and therapist and scholar that many of you may have read. He has an amazing book called My Grandmother's Hands. And we really ascribe as well to his model about collective trauma. And so the idea, one of the things he talks about is, when you watch a movie like 12 Years a Slave, the white gaze is often on the enslaved people in that movie, that There's sort of this horror that this could happen, and it's a horrifying movie, and that really deepens that experience. But rarely do white people look at the white people in the movie as having a shared experience, and that the legacy that I've inherited comes from what the white people in that movie are doing. And when you think about what a white person has to foreclose on their own humanity to do the kinds of things that white people have had to do through history, and of course, slavery is an example I think we can all agree on, but redlining, making sure that Black and brown people aren't allowed in my neighborhood, making, the whole crime bill of the early 90s, and Black and brown people being egregiously imprisoned for small amounts of drug possession. I mean, that these things continue. I mean, we have this massive, prison complex that is just modern day slavery in so many ways. And when we think about that this continues, and that white people have to foreclose upon some aspect of their humanity in order for this to continue, then that is a loss in the bodies of white people as well. And so to reconnect to our humanity is really a process of trauma healing. And this is part of Resmaa Menakem's model. So we want to, in examining whiteness, really provide the space for us to think outside the box about what this healing looks like, but ground that truly on the education that we've been describing, learning from Black and brown voices of lived experience, and really listening to what people's reports of what has happened, and to really be able to bear witness to the way that the as in the legacy of the perpetrator as a white person is what is the legacy of the person who has received the perpetration. And so, the hope is that one of the main dialectics is not only that we reflect on this and we process this and we move through this emotional experience, but that we come to imperfect action, that we take action, and that we take action in our daily lives in small and large ways, and that we understand that it's going to be messy and that we don't really know what we're doing, but that we have to do something, and that when we do something and we learn from it, then we learn what not to do or what to do more of, and we keep going, and that this contributes to policy change eventually, and hopefully as there's more solidarity built, especially in white communities that have the power to make these changes, because Black and brown communities have been organized around these changes for generations. And in some way, what we're wanting to do is join the fight that has been going on for so long.
So, I mean, that was sort of the, giving you an overview of, as we framed it, the problems that we're trying to address and how we address them. And, here kind of the next steps, kind of the nitty gritty of of what we do. So, our hope is that we work with 6 to 10 people. It's it is by design a small group, because we feel like that is where, having a smaller group of people invites greater intimacy and safety, and for everybody to have a real experience of being able to process, all of, I'm imagining for some of you, some, difficult emotions have even come up as we've spoken today. So it really offers, provides the space for people to share that. There we have 6 sessions. They're each an hour and a half long. And between each session, we ask, it's really commitment, as we said, to dig into education throughout. So we, and always listening to Black and Brown voices, through articles, through videos, through podcasts, to really just have that continuing education that is such a big part of anti-racism work. And it's ever, it's ongoing. I mean, there is no just, well, now I'm anti-racist. It is an ongoing practice that we all have to be committed to. So that is part of what, part of the point of having everybody, dig into this education in between. And we talked about the financial contribution to Heal4. So we do, we charge a fee for the sessions, and neither Amanda nor I take any kind of, we don't have any financial gain from the money that we collect. It's either given back to Heal4 to redistributed in another aspect that our Part 2 community collaborates to contribute to, or we put it towards just the administrative cost of running our groups, and running the organization. And then, once you've participated in the 6 sessions, kind of like part 1, part 2, because we haven't yet come up with a name, is kind of the next part. And you become part of our Examining Whiteness community. And as we talked about, this is the ongoing opportunity to continue to build solidarity with one another, to continue to hold spaces where we can, move through that dialectic of being reflective and taking action, and just continue to support each other in this often challenging, rewarding, emotional, runs the full gamut of emotions, but it's important that we, that we have each other in this work. So that's
I'm
kind of the,
that a couple of the, just to add some of the things that part 2 has worked on. So part 2 meets for 4 sessions, and there's no charge, and it's as many people who've gone through part 1 as possible can come. And so one part 2, we worked on voter suppression. We learned more about it, and what can we do to combat it. And it was a very collaborative process on the part of the participants, and learning and action and reflection and connection. Another part 2, we looked at the impact of COVID in jails, especially given the complexities of bail. And so we learned about that, and we thought about that together and how to take action around that. After the snowstorm, we thought about how we can contribute to recovery efforts in Black and Brown communities, how Black and Brown communities were additionally adversely affected throughout that incident. So these are the different things that we come together and kind of learn about, think about, and take action around in part 2. I think that is our that is our world. So we would love to hear any questions or thoughts you have, or we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and I saw John Holverson, I think you put a couple of questions in the chat itself. You were wondering about what does the acronym BIPOC represent? So I just wanted to address that, because I realized that there are can be a lot of acronyms and things that, you know, maybe this is our world, as Amanda said. We can take for granted that people are in this world. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color is what BIPOC stands for. And, you know, and I think I just want to, you know, speak to that for a moment, because I think it can be, you know, people are always like, do I say BIPOC? Do I say people of color? Do I say Black? Do I say brown? You know, and so, and this is part of what we, you know, talk about through examining whiteness is, you know, we don't always know. We want to know and get it right and be the good white person who has the answer and make sure to speak, you know, to say the right thing. And, you know, part of what we learn through examining whiteness, or, you know, is to get comfortable as much as possible with being uncomfortable and being imperfect, you know, not getting it right, and being able to kind of withstand the feelings that come along with that, you know, when we're corrected, if we get it wrong. So I just wanted to also appreciate you, you know, asking the question, to make sure you're clear and that everybody's on the same page. So.
And just to add to that, Anne, I mean, when you say getting it wrong, I think I want to clarify that is that each person, if we always say that Black is not a monolith, that brown is not a monolith, that there is a lot of diversity within the Black community. There's a lot of diversity within the communities of color that we're talking. I mean, vast diversity. I mean, you think about within the Asian community. I mean, that there's, you know, there's historic, you know, tension between Korean and Japanese people. There's, you know, there's so much within communities of color that can go outside of white awareness, because white people are just thinking of Black and brown communities as sort of one-dimensional. So by getting it wrong, it's that one Black person could want to be called a Black person, one person could want to be called African American, and we won't know till we know. So, but the point of BIPOC is that one of the things that really has been important to underline over time is that anti-Black racism is distinct. It is really unfortunately, to put that word mildly, it's sort of the bar that racism is set at, anti-Black racism, and that colorism extends out of the sort of real deeply painful dynamics of where Black people fall in sort of the social strata. So it's really to distinguish that anti-Black racism doesn't fall under people of color. That is a like very amorphous term. And also the experience of Indigenous people is specific in this country. It's very, very specific. And that also doesn't quite fall under people of color. So when we say people of color, it's so amorphous that it's basically saying nothing. And that's part of the point of saying BIPOC.
I noticed that Black was capitalized and not brown a couple times in your PowerPoint slide. Was that to emphasize the special category of Black racism?
Yeah, that is another thing that is an ongoing, it's sort of an ongoing grammatical question. Also, people differentiate or have different ideas about capitalizing white or not. But Anne and I go with capitalizing Black as a really distinct category of identity, and brown being so much more amorphous and covering such a broad swath of experience. It's less of an identity and more of a description. Bill, is your hand up?
Yes, I just want to say we need to wrap up here.
Oh, right.
But what I would like for you to do, and I mentioned to you already that the Adult Education Committee is meeting this afternoon. So it would be helpful, I think, if you can send to me you've talked about these next steps, but what are the next steps? Let's suppose somebody says, we'd like to do this. Where do we go next? Who gathers the names? What are the other kinds of things that are needed for us to say, yes, we'd like to take the next step, and this is what it amounts to?
Mhm.
Would the chair of the education committee be in agreement with gathering the names? And if the names are gathered, then we can contact the people who are interested, and we can see how many groups might be formed. We can offer some dates and times and see who prefers what time. And we can take it from there. If
Well,
you
yeah,
want.
yes, he would be, and I am unanimous in that opinion.
Okay, great.
I have a
Thank
question about the groups.
Sure.
Are they formed within our community, or is there the opportunity to join groups in other communities so that it would be not us talking to ourselves per se, but reaching out and talking to others?
We could do either. I mean, if you wanted to have groups that were among you for the purposes of that intimacy, we could coordinate that. And also there are some people on our waiting list that we could
Mhm.
create groups. If you wanted Paul to be in a group with other people, we could do that as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so one more quick thing, this is my last thing. What we do before you would go into a group is Ann and I would meet with you for about 10 minutes on Zoom, just so you can meet us personally. We can meet you, we can connect and make sure that we're all feeling like we can build a safe container together. And in that conversation, we can get more details around what would you specifically like, how are you feeling about what kind of group you want to be in, and get a little more specific detail to really make a group happen that fits.
Well, thank you so much. This is a provocative in a very good way.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all
you
for
so much.
having us.
Okay, thank you.
So good.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Right. Enjoy your
Bye.
Sunday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
How